What's up, fellas? I'm Bucky Badger W, and today is a day that I have long awaited for a while now because it is the day that I'm doing my 2022 NBA mock draft. After countless breakdowns, a ton of content, tons of analysis across my Twitter, across my TikTok, across all my platforms, today it all culminates in this one video where I'm going to run down all the lottery picks in the 2022 NBA draft. And I'm going to give my analysis on the players, on the teams, on the positions where the players are going to be taken. I'm going to be giving full, complete, deep dive analysis on every pick. And so before we get into anything, this obviously took a really long time to make, a lot of hard work on my part. So I would appreciate if you like the video, just sharing with a friend, liking the video, subscribing perhaps, but sharing with people across different platforms so that we can get the word out, and so that more people can see my content, and so that I can continue to keep pushing out these videos because especially these kind of videos, I really enjoy them. And at risk of dragging this intro out a little bit longer than it should go, I'm going to say I should kind of preview how this video is going to go. It's going to be the top 30 picks. No trades. I thought that was just a little too complicated to have in there. And I think trades kind of just screws up how we're all thinking about these teams and where they're going to be picking and the fits of all of that. So no trades. It's just going to be the top 30 again. And there's going to be just a little screen with the players, some strengths, some weaknesses. Yeah, but so without further ado, let's get into my 2022 NBA mock draft. Let's go. So with the number 1 overall pick, the Orlando Magic select Jaden Ivey, point guard from Purdue. So if you've been following my content since the start of draft season, I think you'll know that Jaden Ivey is maybe my favorite player in this entire draft, just overall. I mean, he is a superhero with the ball in his hands. That's the best way that I can really describe him because his explosiveness is off the charts. I have his player comp on here as Ja Morant, or a better shooting Ja Morant at that. And I think that that's probably the easiest comparison maybe in this entire draft because I think it's just impossible to watch Jaden Ivey and not think he's Ja Morant. I mean, the explosiveness with the basketball in his hands, his speed from 0 to 100, he just speeds past Big Ten defenders in the blink of an eye. He's unbelievably explosive off the ground. He'll dunk on you. He's crafty around the rim. He makes insanely difficult finishes look really easy. In transition, he's maybe the best prospect that I've seen since Zion Williamson and Ja Morant. Maybe even better than that. I mean, it is insane how good this guy is with the ball in his hands in open space. That's definitely his best quality. When he gets the ball in open space, you are not going to be able to stop him. And I think for the Magic, an offensive super creator is something that they got to be looking for. The playmaking chops, I think, is something that is very underrated with Jaden Ivey. I think he is at times a little bit liable to miss some open guys, but the plays that he is able to make for other guys, the skip passes, the dump downs, it's pretty crazy. And I just can't say enough about this guy's athleticism and just his ability to create offensively. Like the second half against Illinois, if you watch that game, it's just insane. The plays that this guy is able to make, his highlight reel is probably the best since Zion Williamson and Ja. Back in that 2019 draft? I think it was. Some weaknesses of his. Defensively, he's not great. But I will say that I don't think you really need to be great defensively if you're creating all the time on offense. Offensively, turnovers and shooting are a bit of a problem for him, as they are for Ja, which obviously is my player comp for him. I think shooting the basketball, it's a little bit overblown how much of an issue that is, but it's still, I think teams are, in the NBA early on, I think teams are going to go under the pick and roll against him, and if he's able to punish them with that, he's going to become unstoppable. Turnover-wise, he has a little bit of a habit to get extremely sped up with how fast he goes, and his flash-like speed, his cheetah-like speed, and his elite quickness, and his ability to just go 0 to 100 in a flash, and that can lead to some areas that he puts himself in that aren't necessarily ideal, and really tough situations. But I think that he's going to be able to figure that out in the NBA. I think just the ability to create for himself and others offensively is off the charts. And at the number one overall pick, it's something that I would have to take. I would have to take that leap on. I got a ceiling as an MVP caliber player, and I think that's easy. I think, well, not obviously not easy, but that is 100% reachable for him. He's John Morant on steroids. I think Jaden Ivey, it's not that he's a can't miss prospect, but his ceiling is absolutely through the roof. It's unbelievable what this guy is able to do with the basketball. To me, fuck fit. He's the number one overall pick. Next up with the number two overall pick, it's the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I think it's a fairly easy decision for them to make, where they're going to take Chet Holmgren, center from Gonzaga. Now, I know for a lot of people, Chet is the number one overall prospect, and he's going number one to the Orlando Magic to go team up with Jalen Suggs. And I don't really have a problem with that. I don't think that Chet is overrated or anything. In fact, I'm fairly high on Chet. It's just that I'm extremely high on Ivey, but we're not talking about Jaden Ivey anymore. Now we're talking about Chet Holmgren, who is one of the best defensive prospects in the NBA draft since I don't even know when. Chet, I've been talking about recently. There is a triangle of kind of attributes that a great rim protector needs to be successful, and that's mobility, awareness, and length. And Chet scores off the charts on all three. Length-wise, obviously, you can't really see from the picture, but he is a absolute slenderman. He's got. I said it in my last TikTok. He's got the Mrs. Incredible arms. His length is just unbelievable, and he just swallows guys up at the rim. You take the basketball at him, he is, if it's anywhere in his vicinity, he's going to be able to block it because he just reaches over and smacks it out of the air. His awareness is off the charts. We'll talk about some guys with really good defensive awareness later, but at the same time, Chet, he's really good at scanning at all times, scanning the basketball court, keeping his eyes on potential cutters to the rim, finding them, and being able to locate and position himself in the right spots to block shots. And that's a really important part of being a rim protector, being able to sense on-ball, off-ball threats at all times, cutting to the rim. Chet is amazing at that. Also, mobility, at 7'1" or 7 foot, it's not, it's something that you ask for, but with his length, you don't have to be super mobile to be able to get out on the perimeter and just funnel guys to the rim because, they're not going to be able to get past your length. And that's what Chet's able to do. And so, his ability to, in the pick and roll, read that well, kind of shut off certain lanes, gobble guys up once they get to the rim. If you put up a shot at the basket and Chet Holmgren is there, I'm sorry to break it to you, but it's not getting it. You're not making it because he is going to swat that ball out of the air. The basket's not going to count. You see, per 75 possessions last year, he had 6.8 steals plus blocks. Those are unbelievable numbers. His box plus minus was off the charts. His stats are unbelievable. Offensively too, there's a lot to be hopeful for with Chet. He shot 40% from three last year, almost at Gonzaga. He's one of the best finishers in this entire draft. I think that was in large part due to playing on such a stacked offense at Gonzaga. But there is a lot to be, especially given that it's basically anything that you get offensively is basically house money with Chet Holmgren, given how good his defense is. So I think that, offensively, there's a lot to be hopeful for as a guy that can potentially create for himself at 7 feet tall. There's a couple weaknesses to poke with Chet Holmgren, but I don't think that a lot of them are really valid. The weight criticism, as a skinny fellow myself, I can say, I'm 5'8", so that's a little different, but it's not easy to play basketball, especially defensively, be that skinny, but he's proved that it doesn't really matter. And I did say on my last TikTok about Chet Holmgren that if you're big enough and skilled enough to take advantage of that, of his light weight, then you're probably taking advantage of everyone else in the NBA too. Because the guys that are going to be able to take advantage of that are like Joel Embiid and Giannis and maybe like a Nikola Jokic. But, I mean, everyone has trouble guarding those guys. So I don't really think it's that much of a problem. His post offense really isn't there. He isn't super shifty. But again, offensively, everything you get is really house money. My player comp for him, I think this is a really easy player comp too to make. It's Evan Mobley, who I see a lot of parallels with his and Chet's game. They're both really long. They're really aware. They're fairly mobile. They got offensive upside. And I think Chet's going to be able to, at some point, potentially be an MVP caliber player. I think he has that upside. I think he's that good. And for the Thunder, a team that's rebuilding, a team that has more guards that they can handle, a team that needs a front court piece, Chet Holmgren at pick 2 would be a blessing from the gods, and Sam Presti would sprint that pick in to Adam Silver. So now pick 3, the Houston Rockets have a pretty easy decision themselves, where they will take Paolo Banchero out of Duke. So like I've been saying all draft season, like where Ivey has his burst and athleticism and Chet has his rim protection abilities, there isn't really any one thing that Paolo excels at, at an especially awesome level. But it's really hard to poke holes in his game and find things that he isn't awesome at. Paolo is 6'10", 250. With athleticism, he's able to get up. He's able to, he has burst that a guy like Chet doesn't have, which is insane at 250 pounds, which makes him a menacing driver. Going to the basket, at Duke, you saw when he was able to make a move and just get a little bit, like an inch past a guy, it was over, because nobody is getting onto, once he has someone on his hip or on his shoulder, they're not going to be able to get around and block a shot. And he is, once he starts getting downhill, he is a menace and he is a load to deal with. And that he's a load that nobody really wants to deal with. It's kind of weird to talk about Chet, who is 195 but 2 inches taller than Banchero, who is 250 back to back, but that's just how the NBA draft is. It's a lot of different players, a lot of different skill sets. One of Paolo's skill sets also is his ability to play make, and make plays for others on the fly. In live action, that's the most valuable ability of playmaking, to be able to, when you're driving, which is where Paolo excels, and trying to get to the cup, when you're able to find a cutting teammate or a teammate out on the 3-point line, and you're able to find them and get them a good shot, that is the most valuable type of playmaking, and that is where Paolo excels. He played with a lot of very talented players on Duke. I believe that there are 5 Duke players in this video. Maybe no. I think just 4. I think there's just 4 Duke players in this video, but still, a very talented team that he played with. But the playmaking ability, I remind you, for a 6'10 guy, was 100% on display. And I compare him to a bigger Jason Tatum, because kind of like Jason Tatum, it's really tough to poke holes in what he does. Yet, he has some consistency issues. Defensively, he's not always locked in 100% of the time. Shooting, even though at times he makes some shots that make you go, like, whoa, that is not what his 6'10", 250-pounder should be able to do. And, at times he makes shots like that, but he also does have some issues there with his consistency as a shooter. But it's really tough to find 3 holes that Paolo has. I think he is probably the highest floor guy in this entire draft, because, with all these different skill sets that he has, with his ability to, he can beat you offensively by shooting the basketball. He can drive it to the cup. He can, if you're bigger, he can go right past you. If you're smaller, he can overpower you on his way to the basket. He can finish. When he's locked in, he can defend as well as anybody else in this class not named Chet Holmgren. He's an elite defender when locked in. He can make plays for his teammates. He can be a good player off ball. There's nothing that Paolo can't do, so it's tough to see him not have a really good NBA career. That's why I have his floor as a high-end starter, which is the highest floor I'm going to list for anyone in this video. I don't know if, it's tough to say also that he can't be an MVP at some point. So, yeah, he's not quite, I don't think he quite has a trait that the other two have that really makes you go, like, oh my God, he's generational. But Paolo, really tough to pass up on in the top 3 picks. that's where I got the Houston Rockets taking him. So at number 4, we got the Sacramento Kings selecting Keegan Murray from Iowa. So Oscar Tshiebwe won National Player of the Year last year, but in my opinion, Keegan Murray was the best player in college basketball. I mean, you look at his stats, he was averaging 31 points per 75 possessions on elite efficiency. His box plus minus was through the roof. He was rebounding the basketball at an elite level. This guy had the Big Ten in his hand. I mean, he was dominating each and every night. And a lot of that was due to, I think, the biggest criticism of him, which is that last year, what I describe it as is he kind of had the play style of a big brother on a Nerf hoop. He was physically dominant, and he may be that at the NBA, but he's 6'8", extremely long, a strong guy. He's fast. He's got hops. He's got everything athletically. He's the first athletic person to ever step foot in the state of Iowa. And I mean, he's an athletic specimen. That's how he dominated the Big Ten last year. He was an elite finisher. He was able to finish at the cup at an elite level just due to his size and athleticism. Defensively, there were times where he was caught a little bit off guard defensively, but when locked in, this guy is as good as anyone in the class, not named Chet Holmgren, obviously. I think a big reason why I'm so high on him is because of his shooting upside, which he shot like 30%, or not 30%, he shot like 40% from 3 last year at Iowa, which was a huge jump up from his freshman year where he really didn't play a ton. Then, he reaches his sophomore year, and all of a sudden, everything is different, including his shooting. I mean, you could not leave this guy open at the end of last year. And I compare him to Giannis Light. Obviously, I got to put the light in there because obviously he's not Giannis. But the ways that he wins are a little bit similar to that of Giannis. Physically dominant. But in the NBA, there's a lot of questions, especially you can see in the weaknesses, he doesn't really have a deep scoring bag. He's a little bit inconsistent as a shooter. He's not a good playmaker. It's a little fuzzy how that's going to work out in the NBA, but I think with his burst, with his finishing ability, with his shooting ability, it's got to be able to work. And I have all NBA as his upside, but honestly, MVP could be in the cards. That said, I think the floor is pretty low for Keegan Murray, but for a team in the Sacramento Kings who don't really have a lot going on, they just went all in with Domantas Sabonis. They're still not going to be a playoff team next year. But getting such a high upside guy like Keegan Murray, even over the guy who we're going to talk about next, that's still an elite move, I think, in my opinion. And if I were the Kings, I would be jumping out of my seat to make this pick. Now, at pick number 5, we got the guy that I'm sure a lot of you have been waiting now for a while, Jabari Smith Jr. from Auburn. So before I start with the negatives on Jabari Smith Jr., which obviously I'm going to have to get into, I want to start with some positives from him, which are he's huge, he's a great defender, and he can shoot the basketball. And that's why his role for him, or his archetype, I have him as a 3-and-D forward. I think that's a lot less than what a lot of people are expecting from him, but he can be a lead in that role. I got his player comp as a better shooting Mikal Bridges. Smith is 6'10", 220, and he is a versatile defender. He can switch onto the perimeter. He can guard, forwards. He can switch on to centers at times. He can switch on to pretty much all at 1 through 5 and defend it at a pretty high level. And I think, for the Pistons, a team, honestly, I think that their pick is going to be Jaden Ivey. But if, in this world, if Jabari Smith Jr. were to fall to them, I think that this would be a great pick for them because you got Cade Cunningham running the offense, and now you got such a great defender in Smith. Also, his shooting is unbelievably good. His defense is as good as just like Murray or Banchero when locked in, but he is always locked in. It's as good as anyone in the draft, not named Chet Holmgren. His shooting, though, is, there's no other way to put it, it's elite. He is able to shoot the basketball, I think. Something that like KD and Brandon Ingram and these other big good shooters are able to do is shoot it over people because their release point is so high and they're that much taller than other people, and their wingspan is that much bigger that they're just able to do that. And that's what Jabari Smith does. Um, and I think that it's because of that he is able to make a ton of shots that, like, in the mid range, that make people, I think, enamored with his game. That said, I'm a lot lower on his offense than a lot of people, and that's because he takes way too many shots that are just unsustainable for good basketball, right? I think that in the NBA, there's nobody that is going to be able to just take a bunch of contested mid ranges and end up as the center of an offense. Or, and we've seen guys like DeMar DeRozan or Kevin Durant kind of be able to live in the mid range. But the thing is that a lot of their mid ranges are fairly open and they are able to create space for themselves. Jabari Smith Jr. is not able to do that. His burst is not there. He's big, but he's not, he's not able to really use that size to his advantage as a creator. He's not really able to play make for others. So I think creating advantages is probably the biggest part about offensive basketball. And Paulo Banchero and Keegan Murray and Jaden Ivey, they do that a lot better than Jabari Smith. And that's why he's down here. Still, he's an unbelievable shooter. So playing off the ball in the NBA just as a catch and shoot threat on the corner, he's going to be lethal. But I think his ceiling, it isn't very high. And that's why I got him here at pick 5. Still, though, for the Pistons, that is one hell of a pick. So I think there is a clear top 5 in this draft. I think number 6 with the Pacers is really where it starts to get interesting. And I got them taking Dyson Daniels from the G League Ignite, formerly of Australia, mate. Daniels, I have his player comp as Luka Doncic light. And, I mean, kind of like Keegan Murray. I've got a little, I'm kind of reaching for the stars on a couple of these guys' player comps. But Daniels, like Luka, he's a slow guy, but he's able to utilize that pace, his slower pace, to be able to be one of the best passers in this draft, if not arguably the best passer in this draft. He doesn't have quite the flashy passes that Jaden Ivey has, but Daniels is always able to find the open guy. He's really good at using his pace, like I said, to kind of be able to pass guys open. That's a great skill that he's going to be able to use when he's running the pick and roll in the NBA. I think his pace is a big, he knows how to play offense, and it's tough to explain that. But I mean, when you see it, you know when a guy is able to play with pace, and you'll know that he's able to do that at the next level. Dyson is 6'6". He doesn't quite have the best burst. As a scorer, there are question marks because he's not a good shooter either. He's not really able to create space for himself. So, how is he going to be able to play make with that? Well, we've seen guys like Josh Giddey, also from Australia, that I think have proven that if you're big and you're a really good creator, you're going to be able to fit in the NBA, especially when you're as good as a defender as Dyson Daniels is. He's not quick, but he's huge, again, at 6'7", and when defending point guards, he just swallows them up, and he funnels them to the rim, and then he blocks shots, and he blocks them emphatically. And so I think at the NBA, he's going to be an offense initiator, not quite on the level of Jaden Ivey, but if I were the Pacers, even though they already got Malcolm Brogdon there, and Tyrese Halliburton, and Chris Duarte, their guards, rotation there is a little stacked, but I think Daniels is going to be able to find a spot there. Him and Halliburton is going to be an elite creating duo there, and I think that's a good spot for him in Indiana, and he's my 6th ranked player on my big board. So I got the Pacers taking Dyson Daniels at 6. Another team who's in a really interesting position this offseason is the Portland Trail Blazers, who have the 7th pick here, and I got them taking Benedict Mathurin, shooting guard from Arizona. So Mathurin is kind of like a slasher on steroids, you could say. His strengths are those of a slasher. He's insanely athletic. I mean, all over YouTube and TikTok and all these platforms, you got highlights of him. I mean, you can go search him up right now. You got insane highlights of him dunking on people, just volleyball blocks. Like this guy, his athleticism is through the roof, and he can jump through the roof. I mean, you see the picture there. My man is jacked. And he is, I mean, athletically, he's a physical specimen, and he is able to use that to his advantage as a shooter. He's able to use that burst to, as his advantage in the open floor, and he is an absolute menace in transition. Um, and I think something that separates him as a slasher from other slashers in this class is his ability to shoot the basketball. He's a really, really good shooter, especially from 3-point range. And he has, off the ball, he has the ability to cut to the basket, cut into open space, and get himself open 3-point shots. And that is able to set him up, even though he doesn't have like a super deep scoring bag per se. He's able to cut into open spots and get himself open shots that way off the ball and use his athleticism to his advantage there and his shooting ability, which, as I said, is unbelievable. Defensively, also, when he's locked in, he's unbelievable. And kind of like, some other guys here, like Paolo and Keegan Murray, the question is he or is he not going to be locked in? But when he is at 6'7", 195, with the ability to slide his feet, I mean, we've touched on the athleticism already. His defense, when he's locked in, he absolutely locks guys down. And I think that's scary upside. I think Mathurin, he has upside to be a Zach LaVine level offensive player with a really good defensive game. And I think that he has scary upside. Like, even, I mean, now that I think about it, even Anthony Edwards is potentially a comparison. Maybe not quite on that level, but he's a scary good player. Some weaknesses really just, I think, consistency across the board. Defensively, not being locked in, shot selection, that's a big one. And then turning the ball over. But honestly, I think Mathurin here, all offseason, I've kept moving him up my boards because the more I think about him, the more I like him as a player. And, despite kind of the stacked rotation of guards that Portland has, they already made this mistake passing on Michael Jordan because they had too many guards in the previous season. So they're not going to do it again. If I were Portland, this is an easy pick for me to make. I'm taking Ben Mathurin at 7. Continuing with the number 8 pick in the NBA draft, I got the New Orleans Pelicans selecting AJ Griffin from Duke. So I've started out a lot higher on Griffin in the NBA draft process, but as the offseason has kind of gone on, I have become a lot lower on him, in large part because I think at the next level, he's mostly just a shooter, and there's nothing wrong with that, because Griffin shot an insane 45% from 3 at Duke last year. Other teams were terrified of him shooting the ball, and for the right reasons. If he gets an open shot, he's knocking it down. And if you're a defense, you have to focus on that, and you cannot leave him open under any circumstances. He's going to walk into the NBA as probably one of the top 10 shooters in the league. And he moves off the ball pretty well. He moves into open spots. Not as well as some other guys in this draft, but he is very good at moving off the ball, getting into open spots, cutting to the rim. He has elite athleticism. He's a good finisher at the rack, which I think separates him from just a 3-and-D wing. But that said, creating for himself offensively, creating for others, there isn't really a lot there. His burst is okay, but his ball handling, it's not great. He's not great at reading a defense and getting to his spots unless it's at the 3-point line. And so I think really he's just a glorified Klay Thompson at this point. Not even a glorified Klay Thompson, but even I think if Klay Thompson, as like the rookie that Klay Thompson was, if he was coming to the league right now, he would not be viewed as an elite prospect, or he probably would, but he wouldn't be viewed as an insane prospect because now we have guys that can shoot the 3 ball just as good as Klay Thompson on pretty much every team. And so I think his ceiling isn't great. I rank him on my big board at number 10. This is the first reach of the draft, and I just think because with the Pelicans, with Zion and Brandon Ingram, but Zion especially, I think they're going to need to space the floor on offense, and I think there's some defensive upside with Griffin, but mainly it's about him being a shooter and being able to space the floor for Zion. I think that that's what the Pelicans need, and they're kind of in a weird spot here, but if this pick were to fall to them at pick 8, I would have them selecting AJ Griffin. No, but number 9, we have the San Antonio Spurs, and I got them selecting one of my favorite players in this draft, EJ Liddell from Ohio State. So I compared Liddell to a short Joel Embiid, and I think that's one of the best comparisons I'm going to make in this entire video because Liddell's skill set, it's really if Embiid was like 5, 6 inches shorter. He is an elite rim protector, one of the best, probably the second best rim protector right now in this draft, right at this moment. He is amazing at keeping his head on a swivel and sorting out, cutting players, cutting, on ball, off ball, all of that. His awareness is through the roof defensively. It's the best in this draft. I've said that's what made like Hakeem a really good rim protector, was that he knew at all times where everyone was coming from, and he knew when to jump. He knew where to jump. He's not, Liddell is he's a very good anticipator of when guys are like really taking their layups, when they're faking it. And he's able to use that anticipation to, even with his shorter wingspan, get a ton of blocks and deflections, just by using great dexterity with his hands and jumping always at the right moment and being in the right places. Offensively, he's a good shooter. He had some problems catch and shoot at Ohio State last year. We'll see how that translates to the NBA, but I believe that with his mid-range game, which is unbelievable, it's knocked down, he's going to be able to translate that to the NBA, especially how he improved from the three-point line at Ohio State. He's an awesome passer, too. I really like Liddell and how he's going to fit immediately in the NBA, and I think, I can see a world where he is a high-level all-star. There are obviously question marks with Liddell. His size, 6'7", 240, which, that weight at times can be a really big plus for him, but also him being shorter, it really hinders him as a rim protector, even with how aware he is. It's still really tough to get a lot of deflections and a lot of blocks being that short as a rim protector. Switchability, he's not going to be great there, switching on to perimeter players. But I think as a weak side rim protector and off ball like floor spacer, I think he's going to walk into the NBA as a clear plus, an Al Horford type player. And I think that he has a really high floor, a fairly high ceiling. He's one of my favorite players in the draft. And so I got the Spurs taking him at 9. Even though they're still kind of in a rebuild, I think when they start to compete, Liddell is going to help them out a lot. So I've talked about Liddell ad nauseum. I've talked about him a ton across all my different platforms. One guy I haven't talked as much about is Jeremy Sochan, who I have the Wizards taking at number 10. So if you remember the Rockets selecting Usman Garuba from Spain last year, that is a very similar player to what Sochan is, and a very similar idea. And I was a big fan of Garuba. I still think he's going to have a pretty solid NBA career, even though he didn't pop out the charts in year 1 in the NBA. But Sochan is the same idea as a forward who's big, he's mobile, and I just have him, his archetype basically as a defensive chess piece. I think that's what he's going to be used at in the NBA. I don't think he really has a specific role that you can put him in, but on defense, you just put him out there and you throw him at the other team's best player, I think is generally the idea with Jeremy Sochan. He's 6'10", 230, extremely mobile, aggressive, and he's a smart defender too. He doesn't foul a lot. He's able to get into the opposition's faces without fouling, and he wreaks havoc, and he creates turnovers. He just makes life a lot tougher on the offense. He's not the best rim protector, but I just think, again, he's a guy who you can throw at the other team's best player, and he's going to give them an absolute fit. His off-ball defense is solid too. He's like, with his rotations and whatnot, he's really good at staying keen on that and just staying vigilant on that. And that's a big part of why I'm so high on him. Offensively, kind of like Chet, it's mostly house money with how good his defense is, and it's not all the way there. He's a good finisher and cutter, but He's not really able to create for himself a ton. He's a pretty good playmaker, but he's not really a good enough scorer to have the ball in his hands enough for that to really matter at this point. And he's not a good shooter too, which in the NBA, if he's able to improve that, that will be huge because I think what teams are going to do is they're just going to leave him open and they're going to say, I mean, you're great on defense, but we're going to play you off the court on offense. I think his size is a little bit of something that could hold him back in the NBA. Being a smaller player is kind of tough when you're playing a role where you may have to protect the rim. It's the same thing as Liddell, but I think his skill set, his athleticism, his verticality, he's going to be able to be just fine in that. And I think really his main role again is just going to be a chess piece where you move around and man-to-man defense, on-ball defense. He's an absolute stud. But yeah, I think for the Wizards, a team that has struggled defensively mightily for the past couple of years, getting a player like Sochan would be huge for them. And so that's why I got him taking Sochan at pick 10. And so now finally at pick number 11, we have my favorite player in this draft as a Wisconsin Badger fan in Johnny Davis, shooting guard from Wisconsin. So I have his player comp listed as Jaylen Brown, and I think that that's the role that he's going to be the most successful in the NBA. And I think a lot of the discourse or a lot of kind of the branches of the discourse with Johnny Davis stem from what his role in the NBA is going to be. Like, is he going to be a primary ball handler? Is he going to be a defensive first guy? Is he going to be able to shoot? Is that going to impact it? Or is he going to be playing off the ball with someone else? I think that's where he's going to be the best, where there is another creator next to him and he is able to kind of play off ball, be a slasher, not have to always create for himself, but he's going to be able to at some points. And I think athleticism-wise, Davis is as talented as anyone in this draft not named Jaden Ivey. His burst is unreal. He goes from, as a Badger fan in 2021, I guess technically his freshman year, I was extremely high on him and said this is a future All Big Ten player. This is a future Big Ten Player of the Year, and it was mostly because I saw his burst and his ability to go just right past guys in the blink of an eye. His finishing is unbelievable too. Once he gets the basket, he is creative, he's athletic, and around the rim, once he gets there, you're not really going to be able to stop him, even if you're a lot bigger than he is. Defensively too, he uses that big size, his lateral quickness, his awareness to be able to frustrate ball handlers, really get them out of their zone. And he's arguably the best perimeter defender that we've named so far, other than probably Sochan. His athleticism, we already talked about it, but it's unbelievable. So my player comp for him is Jaylen Brown, and I think a big problem of his is creating for himself when there's not a guy next to him. Like at Wisconsin last year, other than Tyler Wall kind of at the end of the year, they didn't really have anyone else that could go get their own shot. And that was where a lot of the problems stemmed from with Johnny Davis. And you saw clearly at the end of last year, that's not going to be his role in the NBA. Because when you apply some defensive pressure to Davis, he's a solid passer, but he doesn't deal with that well as a scorer. He would take bad shots, turn the ball over all the time. You see a less than 1 assist to turnover ratio there on the stats. It just wasn't super pretty when he had to go all the time get his own shot. But when he's one-on-one, Davis is a formidable scorer. Shooting the basketball is a pretty big question mark with him. In the mid-range, he was a solid shooter, but on the outside, there's definitely some questions there. Even when he was left open, it definitely wasn't a guarantee that he was going to knock the shot down. So for the Knicks, I think that this is a team that is in limbo. Are they going to start to go all in? Like if they trade for Donovan Mitchell, obviously yes. Or are they going to try to tear it all down, rebuild once again, and go for the future? I think Johnny Davis kind of gives you a possibility for both there. And he gives you the option to, he can help you win now as a slasher and cutter off the ball, which is where we played in Wisconsin year one. and that's where he's going to be really successful in the NBA, or kind of in the future, you can let him grow into his role and he can become kind of a Jaylen Brown type player. I think either way, Davis is going to be a very good NBA player. I think some people got him like top 5 on their big boards. Some people got him late first round. It's all over the place with Johnny Davis. I think I'm sort of in the middle as someone who watched Wisconsin pretty much every game last year from start to finish religiously. And so I think I'm kind of in the middle on Davis, but he's going to be a very good NBA player. And if I were a Knicks fan, I'd be very happy with this pick. And next up here at pick 12, we got the Oklahoma City Thunder, and they're selecting Shaedon Sharpe, shooting guard, technically from Kentucky, but really from Dream City Christian High School. I definitely botched that name, but Sharpe is one of the more intriguing and interesting prospects in this draft because it feels like nobody really knows what to do with him. I got his player comp as Paul George without the defense, but I mean, you also look at his ceiling and floor. He could be an all-NBA level player. He could also be a bench player out of the league in a couple of years. Because the last we saw of this guy was in high school. As many of you know, he reclassified from the 2023 draft class to 2022 to play technically with Kentucky, but he didn't play a single minute of basketball for Kentucky. And so when you're playing against high schoolers, to me, that just makes it pretty hard to evaluate you going into the NBA, especially when Sharpe was not as dominant as you would like to see against high schoolers. And I'm a high schooler. I'm like 5'8", like 120. I'm not saying that I'm the type of guy that'd be guarding Shaedon Sharpe, but it's inarguable that it's a lower level of competition. Now that doesn't really have a ton to do with what I saw from him, just his game wise, but it is kind of a little asterisk to put like, this guy was playing against high schoolers. But getting into his game, he's a 6'5" shot creator. He's maybe the most athletic player in this class. You can argue him in, I would argue Jaden Ivey is a lot more athletic actually, but probably the second most athletic player in this entire draft class. And he's got a scoring bag too. All the handles you can ask for, he's got them. He can shoot the basketball. That's why I compare him kind of to a Paul George without the defense. In his prime, that's kind of what Paul George was. So as a scorer, he's shown that he could potentially be unbelievable at the NBA level. And he could walk into the NBA year one, especially for the Thunder, and go out there and average like 20 a game, 20 plus a game. And it wouldn't necessarily surprise me a ton. I will say, though, outside of scoring, especially for a guy that, again, playing against high schoolers, there wasn't a ton to see. Defensively, he's probably, I'd say he's definitely the worst player that we have talked about so far. Defensively, is a clear minus. I don't know if it's just that he's, playing in high school and it's, whatever. I just went to algebra. Like, why do I have to play this basketball game? But his defensive awareness was not there most of the time. You see all the time him getting back cut into oblivion or just losing his guy off ball. There are some moments that he has of ridiculous swats, but the consistency isn't all the way there, and I don't think it's going to be there in the NBA. His playmaking too is not exactly what you like to see. Again, he's playing with high schoolers. Why would he pass the ball if he can score every time? I guess that that's a fair criticism, but I just think that for a guy who was playing against high schoolers, he didn't necessarily show enough for me to say he has any kind of high floor, and I think he's kind of a gamble in the NBA. That said, a gamble is exactly what the Oklahoma City Thunder are looking for with this pick, and I think they get Shaedon Sharpe in there. They got all the picks in the world. It's fine if he doesn't develop into anything, but if he develops into Paul George without the defense, that's awesome, and they're going to be a dynasty. And now we are nearing the back half of the lottery where we got the Charlotte Hornets at pick 13 selecting Jalen Duren, center out of Memphis. So I'm a lot lower on Duren than the public, and that's because I don't really think that he has any traits that really make me think that he's going to be a lot more than a rim runner in the NBA. And that's fine. I mean, I have his player comp as DeAndre Ayton. DeAndre Ayton's a great rim runner in the NBA, and he helps you win basketball games. That said, I wouldn't want to take, spend like a top 6, top 7, top 8 type pick on a guy who, I don't think he's going to be one of the best players on my team in a couple of years. I mean, potentially one of the best players, but not, a lead guy of a dynasty. That said, Jalen Duren as a rim running big, it's hard to do a lot better. Size and athleticism wise, he's 6'11", 250, can jump out of the roof. Um, you know, can jump out of the building. That's what I meant to say. Can protect the rim very well when locked in. There's times defensively where he's caught lacking a little bit, but for the most part, defensively, he's great. Um, as a lob threat, he's maybe the best in this draft. You just lob it up there. He's got that big wingspan. He's gonna be able to grab it, throw it down. He's a powerful guy. But I just listed off like the qualities of a good rim protector. You got a lot of guys that are really good rim protectors in this draft, like Mark Williams. Rim runners: Mark Williams, Walker Kessler, Christian Coloco. You got a lot of those guys, Moussa Diabate, who are kind of just interchangeable. I don't think Duren is a ton better than any of those guys. Like shooting, it's a weakness. I don't really think that it's going to improve a ton. Playmaking is not good. He's not really able to create for himself. He's got a ton of just bad turnovers, like 4 turnovers a game almost for a player with his load, which really offensively wasn't a ton, is very concerning. And he's a good lob threat, I think, for LaMelo, and this is like the 5th year in a row that I've mocked the Hornets a center, because I think that's pretty clearly what they need, to stretch the floor, to protect the rim on defense. So I think that that's really the main reason why I got him taking Duren, but I don't think that he's anything really special. And if I'm the Hornets, I'm taking him and I'm locking him in as a center from day one to a long time in the future. But this isn't really a franchise-changing pick. That said, it's a good pick at pick 13. And now with the final pick of my NBA lottery mock draft, the Cleveland Cavaliers are going to select Ochai Agbaji, shooting guard out of Kansas. So if we're comparing them as prospects, Agbaji is a much better prospect than Shaedon Sharpe. I got Sharpe going in front of him because that's what the Thunder kind of need. He's a better fit with the Thunder. But just as players, Agbaji is a much better prospect. And I think the main strength of his, even over being able to shoot the basketball at an unbelievable level, being the second best shooter that we've named after AJ Griffin, is his off-ball offense. And off the ball, he moves, even not being able to like cross guys over and get to the basket on his own with the ball, he is still able to get himself open shots the way that like Steph Curry or Klay Thompson would, by moving off the ball, by when guys are driving into the lane, being able to know how to rotate off of that and get himself into an open shooting space. He is amazing at that. And I don't know how like a soccer background in Nigeria helps with that. It's kind of weird how I don't know his full like history, but coming from a soccer background, you wouldn't think that he would be as great of a shooter as he is, but he is. And I mean, maybe that helps with being able to move into open space. I don't know, but he is awesome as a shooter, and athletically. I talked about his ability to cut off ball into open space to shoot the ball, but Kansas used him as a cutter all the time, and they used him as a lob threat all the time. They would have this play that I saw on a breakdown from Adam Spinella, where they would send a screen to him at the three-point line. He would run kind of around it, and then they would just lob it, and he would be right there for a slam at the basket. And that was an awesome play to watch. And that was a great series by Kansas, knowing how to use his off-ball ability and his athleticism, which is through the roof. Maybe the soccer background helps with that. But it helps him defensively, where he's able to slide his feet. He's mobile. He's a good jumper. He's fast. And when he's locked in, obviously he's not locked in all the time defensively. That's why it's not a huge strength of his. But when he's locked in, and if he is locked in more at the NBA level, he's going to be a great defender. On his own, offensively, I don't think he's great. That's why he's down here. He's not really able to get his own shot at the same ability that Johnny Davis is, or that even Sharpe is, just on the ball. But as an off-the-ball piece, especially pairing with Darius Garland, who's going to have the ball in his hands all the time. As a kick-out, catch-and-shoot shooter, Ochai Agbaji is a perfect fit for the Cleveland Cavaliers. I got his player comp as a smaller Desmond Bane. Desmond Bane is jacked, but kind of in the same role, Ochai Agbaji is going to be able to play that. And I don't think his ceiling is through the roof, but his floor is pretty high. And overall, I think Ochai Agbaji is a great fit with the Cavs and a great prospect. So that is going to do it for my NBA lottery mock draft this year. Thank you all for watching. Stay tuned on either Twitter or TikTok for more NBA draft content before the draft on Thursday. I think I am going to go live for the draft Thursday night. I got work before then, so we'll see kind of how that works out. But I think that I'm going to go live probably on YouTube during the NBA draft to break down those picks, to just chat about the NBA, about basketball, about whatever. And yeah, so thank you all for watching. Stay tuned for, I think I'm probably going to post the rest of my picks, the rest of the first round on Twitter most likely, but it may go on TikTok too. It could even be another YouTube video. I may go live for that. But finally, once again, thank you all for watching. Be sure to share, like, subscribe if you like the video, and I will see you all next time.